because you've had a student issue emerge. She's very sensible, and if there is a pattern of student complaints or reports, her heart towards you, towards me, will be to review how those challenges came to be and to really address those things proactively. So just be aware of that. And Joyce is an excellent contact person. Let's see, several of you asked, will the PowerPoint be available to you? Yes, I'll email that afterwards. What do I mean by a challenging student is a question? I love students who question and want to extend their learning. I like students who challenge concepts and thoughts. I don't like it when students get real belligerent about feedback and want to argue about feedback or argue about policy and procedure, or are misinformed and think that they are in charge of the class when they're not. So when I say a challenging student, I'm thinking of someone who is having a hard time productively engaging in a higher learning environment. These may also be students who are hostile towards other students and not open to feedback and growth. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about a challenging student. And what do you guys think of when you think of a challenging student? Anybody have some thoughts? You can unmute and share or type it in the box. Hey, somebody has never had a difficult student. That's wonderful. I have a few I can share with you.
I have a thought on that. If
please.
Yes. Some students will wait till it's very late in the semester, in the term, and then ask for help to complete the class, when regularly we send them messages telling them you haven't completed this, you haven't completed that, or maybe even in some cases already have given them extensions. So what should we do in that case? Because I try to be as accommodating as I can, but when there's only a few days before the end of the term, the student really doesn't have time to do much to make up for what they didn't do. That's a great example, Billy, of students who can become real challenging because they're not managing their time well. They've procrastinated. It's now an emergency for them. I don't view it as being an emergency for me. These are not 4-year-old students. These are adult students. So what do some of you think? I've got a recommendation there. What would you all say has worked well with this type of challenging student?
Billy mentioned exactly the question that first popped into my head. This is Jennifer. I've often, in the first week of class, even in my announcements, I list my course expectations. So I will say, for example, I will accept an assignment up to a week late with a deduction of points. After a week late, it is not accepted. So when their grade book starts to be filled with zeros, and all of a sudden at week 6, they are populated with a whole bunch of back assignments, I simply reply, paper is past the accepted due date, will not review. And hopefully has not been challenged, but they often wait until week 6, 7, and all of a sudden, and they participated maybe in the discussion forum throughout, so you know they're present, they just don't turn assignments in. That seemed to work for me, because then I can simply say refer back to week 1, and then about halfway through the term, I'll remind people, you know, of what my expectation is and what I will allow and what I not allow. Because I don't want to be scrambling either.
I think that's a great approach, and I would recommend you have a specific announcement clarifying the late policy, how you handle late assignments. I think sometimes we have students with exceptions, emergencies, and those are reasonable, but when, you know, the 7th grandparent has died in the semester, you're having the wool pulled over your eyes. So I would, you know, I think proactively communicating before you have an issue means that you won't have students feeling like you've unfairly singled them out. So I have announcements that I place that just clarify and highlight that. and I send it directly to their email also. You know how you can delay the posting, or you can post it now and send a proactive email? That's what I would do.
I've noticed that the students that are going to be maybe perhaps out of town or do have a situation, those students are generally very proactive and will email, or if I say, yes, you may have an extra week, those generally are not the problem students, because they are reaching out, and I do the same thing. Kristen is say, please send me an email.
Yes.
You know, and it's the other situation that Billy stated that is unfortunately happens a little too often.
Yes, yes. That's a great point. And Lisa in the chat has just highlighted sometimes there are serious weather issues. We had tornadoes in the Kansas, Missouri area, you know, in the past year where people had no power. So I'm going to extend a little flexibility there, but I'm also not going to help reinforce a pattern where a student, you know, Sunday 11:30 every week is when they post their stuff. Come on, let's get it together. Let's build in a little margin. Life happens. This is not a surprise. This is not an emergency. It's a lack of planning and maturity on the part of the student. Good questions. Let's see. I've also got some chat comments that difficult students who plagiarize. We'll talk a little bit about that. Students who have some challenges with language use, composition, those types of things. We'll talk a little bit about that too. Great sharing. I love the chat feature. We can just have a whole conversation, several conversations going all at once. I love it. All right, so your academic affairs team. So you've got Dr. Joyce Caldwell. Keep Joyce in the loop. As soon as you get a whiff of a student complaint, a student upset, reach out to me, reach out to Joyce, reach out to Andrea. We want to help you be successful. We want to help the students be successful. So Andrea handles lots of the administrative roles related to academic affairs and online instruction. She offers you contracts and you receive frequent communication from Andrea. Keep her in the loop. You know, sometimes we have students that have a pattern, and we are aware of the student's pattern of behavior, and you may not be, because this is the first time you've interacted with them. So frequent communication with all of us. Another layer of support that you have is there are 4 full-time online faculty members. Dr. Karen Bryson, I see you on the call. Fred Romero. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Did somebody want to say something? Okay. So Dr. Karen Bryson is here, and Fred Romero. Both are located in Arizona. Not that geography matters when we're talking about online. And then I and George Eschnow are both located in Kansas City. And so you all may not know that we are organized in such a way that by content area, our job is to be supportive of you all. So when you have a student issue, if you reach out to Andrea, she may forward that to one of us, and we will call or email with you on some strategies to take care of those students. So just be aware that we are here and we want to help you be successful. You may also find that you have content area questions, and there are lead faculty by content area that typically have a doctorate in their field. So if you've got a specific question about an assignment in a junior level mathematics class, you're going to want to talk to the lead faculty in math. You don't want to talk to me about that, because I will be no help at all in math. But just know your team, friends, and communicate real proactively. Couple Ottawa policies. Academic integrity obviously is something we expect of ourselves as faculty and our students. And right now, I'm just pulling some policies out of the adult handbook. You can find this on the portal. I would recommend you review this document. Students sign a little electronic notification saying they have received and they understand this document. So it's wise of you to understand and acknowledge it as well. And I know many of you, when you've got a specific challenge with a student, will point back to those policies, and that is very wise. I would encourage you to keep familiarizing yourself with that and maybe the substance of some of your announcements in your class. Does everybody know where to find that on the portal? Or may I send you a link? Okay, I see a few nods. Would it be helpful for me to send you the link for that adult handbook? Yeah? Okay, great. I will do that. No problem. No problem.
Kristen, I have a question.
Great. Please.
Copy and Enjoy, so I work with as well. She's awesome. When someone is potentially, let's say, failing halfway through the course, or we're giving a lot of zeros because they're not turning their assignments in, should we copy in if is a heads up? We think it's going to be a challenging student because oftentimes you don't hear from them throughout the term. Should we also copy in their academic advisor?
Yes, please. That's a great question, Jennifer. So what I do in weeks 1 and 2, as I see students who are not engaging and they're not off to a strong start, I have a standard email that I send to the students in weeks 1 and 2, and then I copy the academic advisor. You could also copy Joyce if you want to, but it basically says, gosh, I hope everything's all right. And if there's anything I can do to help you be successful in this course, please reach out to me. Here's my contact information. And then I review the late policy. And so I take it, like many of you, in a very supportive, encouraging tone, but I also remind them about the policy. I'm not going to be a pushover. You know, I think all of us probably in our first few terms of teaching, whether that was last year or 40 years ago, we probably started off a little more accommodating. And then we figured out that we were maybe getting a line of baloney. And so we've gotten a little tougher as time goes on. And I used to lose sleep, to be honest, when I first started teaching. Oh, these poor students, and I failed them. No, we don't fail them. We report the grade they earn, friends, right? Okay, so I don't lose sleep anymore, which is excellent. Not about that. My teenagers maybe, but not about this. So yes, Jennifer, so everyone on your Blackboard shell, if you go to the full grade book and you see your list of students, if you scroll over right next to the student's name, one option is to email the student, and that'll go straight out of Blackboard, and it should copy you as well. So then you have some options. If you know who the academic advisor is, you can just type that in as a copy to them, or you can go into your sent items and forward it to the academic advisor. I personally like the student to see that the academic advisor has been kept in the loop because hopefully it will point them in the direction of additional support, that they know that advisor. The advisors call them every term. So, you know, they may think that, gosh, that Moore professor, she's just mean, but I know Connie, and Connie has talked to me several times, so I'm going to call her to get some help. I don't care where they get the help. It doesn't need to be me, but that's a great suggestion, Jennifer. Thank you for that. Let's see, they fail themselves. I'm just looking through the chat. Numerous reminders to complete assignments. So, you know, another thing you may want to do in the first couple weeks of your class is a reminder about what's due, or a reference to be sure to review page 7 on the syllabus so you know what's coming up, that kind of thing. Let's see, I hear a little bit about first online class. So you all are talking in the chat about APA. Are you all saying that they complain about losing points and nobody has ever in their whole life held them accountable for APA in the way that you are, you mean faculty member? Is that the feedback? Yeah. Yeah, I see lots of nodding. Okay, so here's something y'all may not be aware of. This isn't true of all education students, but all of our business students, all of our arts and sciences students, the very first class they take is called Writing and Critical Thinking. Many of you on the call have taught this specific course. For the last year, only the full-time online faculty have been teaching this class because our goal is great consistency. So let me just assure you, your class or the capstone class is not the first time they've heard of APA. And it's not the first time they've received feedback on their APA formatting. In fact, they get a very heavy dose of that in the first writing and critical thinking class. Something that I do that has helped me avoid lots of argument and concern about how mean I am about APA is I have a standard announcement. In the Ottawa Online Library, there's an example APA paper, there's an example APA reference page, and there's this lovely check sheet for students to use to proof their own paper to see if they've measured up to those expectations. I post that in week 1. And I'm just real clear and I say, this is the example from which I am working. This is the standard from which I will grade your work. Please make sure that you align your lovely formatting to this document, please. And then in my feedback, I'll just say, this is not quite right. Please go back to the announcement from week 1 and realign your references so that they meet with the expectations. So,
is there a way that those could be added to every shell?
That's a great idea. I'm going to write that little suggestion down. It's out there, but if it's not right in front of them, they're probably not going to engage with that. Dr. Bryson, would you have anything else to say about APA training in the initial classes that students take that I missed?
No, I don't. I think you covered it really well, but I do want to reiterate that that initial class, one of the major focuses of that class is for them to learn APA. So really, there's no reason for anyone who is an Ottawa undergraduate student to say that they have never seen APA or don't understand the APA or don't know APA, because one of the goals of that first initial class is for them to have an understanding of APA, and we do reinforce that. So that's just simply not true.
Great comments. Thank you. All right, let's see. Any other questions from the chat that I missed? One question is, what about students whose first language is not English and their writing reflects that? Do we cut them slack? Yes and no. They need to know what the standard is. In order to be admitted to Ottawa University, they need to demonstrate a certain level of English proficiency through the TOEFL and other means. My approach, especially in earlier undergrad classes, would be to mark everything that is not correct, but maybe be a little more merciful on the point deduction, knowing that I am not fluent in a second language in a way that I could write a paper and do well. So I think we want to be merciful. We want to be understanding, but we also don't want to misrepresent where the standard or the bar is for what academic writing looks like. Karen, what would you add to that, or others who have taught a long time? How do you deal with second language learners in your classes?
I think you made a great comment. I think feedback is extremely important in helping the student to rise to the level that we want to see their proficiency in the language. So what I tend to do is give a tremendous amount of feedback, help them to become more proficient, but I try not to penalize them too much as far as deducting or failing them or giving them a bad grade. So I think you handled that really well.
You know, something you may want to explore with online language learners is we've got Net Tutor available on our website, where essentially they can access writing tutors who will look through their documentation. Often in local metropolitan areas, there are services that are available where a student who is really desiring to take their written language to the next level can access some of those services as well. So I would encourage them to also explore what's available to them in their local area as well. But we've got NetTutor, we've got some other services online. So spend a little time. You may even want to create a standard announcement, again, that you proactively communicate in week 1 or week 2 about the importance of continuing to upgrade the quality of our written communication, whether it's our first language or second or third. So fantastic. All right, good deal. Well, back to academic integrity then. Here's what we're trying to get done, right, friends? We're trying to help people learn in a legitimate way. We're trying to foster a climate of mutual trust and encouragement, free exchange of ideas. This is where sometimes we have some challenges with our students who, you know, I teach some classes where there's some pretty contentious issues that we discuss in class. So on those weeks, I typically have an announcement that just says, part of being an educated person is the ability to have a civil dialogue, even if you passionately disagree. And it's okay to passionately disagree. I've got some very close friends that I absolutely love who view the world very differently than I do because of their experiences and their belief systems and their political leanings. But we as educated people certainly need to be able to have civilized conversation about these things. So when I've got a student who maybe handles things too harshly or flat out gets aggressive with another student, that's something I need to proactively manage. That typically starts with a clear email that reviews the policy about academic integrity. And it is okay to disagree. It's okay not to correspond with that particular peer in your class if you can't do that. But what's not okay is to get aggressive, insulting, mean, derogatory, because that's not their role. In very extreme cases, I once had a student that I had to reach out to the technology side of the house to pull down a student's comment that was just absolutely inappropriate for our learning environment. Typically what I do is the first time I ask the student to go in and edit their comments. And I use words like, it could be perceived that you were attacking what Mary had to say. It's okay to have differing opinions, but it's not okay to attack each other. So I'd like you to go in and edit that and upgrade that as an important demonstration of your continued scholarly growth. And if they're unwilling to do that, then in extreme cases, and this is one to definitely reach out to Joyce about, you don't want to remove that posting unless you need to. What's real interesting to me with adult students is typically what happens is it just gets ignored. And after about 2 weeks, if somebody's kind of being snarky and rude to their classmates, they'll reach out to me and say, it doesn't seem like anybody wants to talk to me about my ideas. That's an interesting observation. Why do you think that might be? So only in the most extreme situations do we need to review or, pull those. But we do want to continue communicating with those students proactively. Let's see, several great chat comments. It's okay to disagree, but not be disagreeable. Oh, I love that. That's quotable. That's tweetable, Marcia. That's great. Let's see, academic discussions are not an argument on the street. Exactly. Goodness me. Act like the educated person you are seeking to become. Reposting the question, going, okay, and plagiarism is a huge problem online. We're going to talk more about that too. Oh, good questions. Man, you guys have had your coffee today. I love it. All right, let's see. Next slide. We're committed to providing a learning and working environment that promotes integrity, civility, mutual respect, and free from bias. I love the word civility. That's kind of my hot button word these days, especially with everything going on in our nation. I think civility is such an important concept. So this is right out of the Adult Learning Handbook again. and it's something that you can post in your class as well. Standards of behavior. Whoops, sorry, went too far. Can you all see what the screen I'm sharing? Can I get a thumbs up? Yeah? Okay, perfect. All right, so again, standards of behavior. We can't tolerate behavior that impinges on somebody else's freedom, their humanity. We want to help facilitate all of our students being physically and psychologically healthy. And, you know, as I read the adult student handbook, sometimes I think it applies more to a face-to-face instructional environment, but we can't underestimate what the impact of a really abrasive conversation could have on the psychological health of our online students as well. So we want to protect that. We're all about responsibility, and we're thinking about all of our constituents, not just those in a smaller scale. So when we run into students who are disruptive, they're threatening, they're impinging on those rights of others, that's where we need to be more proactive. It's not okay to harass people, obviously verbally, in the online environment or via email, and so that's important. All right, let's see. Let me just get back out on the chat. Some good thoughts. What thoughts do you all have about those behavioral expectations as they pertain to the online environment? Any comments there? Let's see. In the chat, good comments just about generally. We do a good job of speaking to each other in a civilized way. Got a question about our Christian heritage and arguments related to religion. That's going to come up in class sometime, and we certainly have plenty of space for people to have differing views. But that key word of civility, I think, is again important. Especially in the liberal arts classes, a lot of values come up. In all of the business ethics classes, that comes up as well. And many of you on the phone, I know, have a personal faith that is important to you, but I don't think any of us approach that with the strong arm that maybe in some spaces others would. So, all right. So just a few more thoughts to share, and then I really want to talk more. Let's see, examples from my personal experience. I've had students with an aggressive tone, inappropriate words, and attitudes in the Blackboard shell. And as I said before, what has worked well for me in the past is a proactive email. I will typically keep Joyce in the loop, even in those first few communications, because I've had a few students who, I had one in the past year that in correcting his tone and attitude, escalated and felt like I was violating his First Amendment rights. And that was the conversation. So of course that wasn't the case. And he had assumed, he had some pretty strong political comments in class, and he really felt like it must be that I disagreed with his stance, and that's why he was being persecuted and I was violating his rights. So again, that's an extreme case, but whenever we have that come up, just keep communicating. Emotional boundary issues. Maybe some of you have run into this. As students tell their story, sometimes they share a lot more intimate detail than really is appropriate in the academic setting. So that may be, again, a conversation about presenting oneself in a professional manner. And when we overshare, that may make others uncomfortable. Direct verbal attack or insults towards other students. I've also experienced this. And that's typically, I make a phone call on those and just say, you need to get in and you need to edit or delete that posting right now, please. Or I'm going to have to report you to the Dean of Instruction for violating the agreement about how we operate in an academic setting. Aggressive emails and posts towards me as the faculty member. Personally, I'm less troubled by that than when somebody attacks another student. I can take it if they're mad at me. I'm okay with that. But obviously, if it's I'm going to come hunt you down, then I'd respond pretty strongly to that. So, what are you all experiencing out there, just from a behavioral standpoint? We're going to come back to plagiarism and some of those more academic things, but have y'all been, in the last year, have you had any students in terms of aggressive behavior?
This is Bob. I've seen a little bit of commentary now and again that borderlines a point where you want to respond to the student, but a lot of times it deals with political parties or gender or as you said earlier, there's a lot of things going on in politics in our country, and students will allude to it and they'll get kind of on the edge. I kind of watch it and see if it escalates, and sometimes it kind of fades away. But my only comment is I'm seeing a little bit more of that, and we could see more of that going forward as well. Yeah, that's a good observation, Bob. And Donald just shared, sometimes students will put things in all caps. And there's actually some verbiage in Blackboard about netiquette, and that's another good, especially maybe in these current times, to just post that. You need to be aware that if it's in all caps, it may come across as yelling or a little bit belligerent, and students just may not know. I try to always start assuming they just don't know, but they need to know pretty quick and correct that behavior. So. Let's see. Somebody said that they had a student who sent repeated text messages and you had to ask them to stop. That happens sometimes, especially with those students who maybe don't have the emotional boundaries that we would like them to have developed. They're lonely. They have another need beyond what we can meet in the academic setting. So I would be real clear in your announcements and in class if you're meeting face-to-face. Here's how it's appropriate to interact with me, and here's the window within which I'll respond, and keep a boundary there for yourself. And then if it starts to get a little messy, again, reach out to Joyce, reach out to me, reach out to others to say, how would you handle this? Let's see, not wanting to accept responsibility for lack of participation. Well, that's always going to happen. I just remind them what the policy is. And my style, I kind of call it being the friendly nag. I'll just say, gosh, I understand you're very busy. I am too. And, this is what's expected. And in the past, the students who have been most successful, I've observed, do the following behaviors. And so that's probably just an emotional growth issue for that student. Let's see. Garth commented that students may be more aggressive in sharing their opinions online. I think, yes, that's the virtual courage, right? Nobody can give me a dirty look, so I'm going to throw out a comment that's probably 30% more extreme than it would be if I had to say it to your face. I think that's just another proactive announcement early. This is an academic setting. You are professionals. This is a great place to practice appropriate behavior that we would use in the workplace. It's not okay to send an emotionally charged comment out there. That's not how we treat each other in this setting. Let's see, all caps. Let's see, somebody shared that they had worked with Dr. Caldwell, student who was aggressive about being held accountable. And yeah, there'd been a pattern of behavior with this student. That's often the case. They're working through their own issues, and sometimes people just need to take a little break. And sometimes they're invited to take a little break because they're not progressing, they're not handling things appropriately. And that's one of the tools Joyce has in her pocket, is to say,
you know, if this can't be fixed, then you're going to need to take about 6 months off to regroup, and then you can re-engage. And I think that's great. I think that's great. Let's see. Lots of comments. You guys are record breakers on the comments. I love it. All right. Let's see. So I've got a good question about plagiarism and safe assign. And I'm glad the sun's coming up, Lisa. That's funny. Let's talk a little bit about plagiarism. So in some of our classes, we automatically have safe assign in there. For all of us, we can go in manually into the tools in the Blackboard shell and post a student's paper to safe assign. I would very much encourage you to be using that, but we want to think critically about it. You all are probably aware that when a student submits a paper, let's say I'm a student in Anne's class, Ann Williams' class. If I post it and I'm wearing my student hat, it goes into the database against which all other papers will be compared. So then if I post it and for a second time, so I got that feedback from Safe Assign, and now I post it again in Dr. Williams' class, it will come back as 100% plagiarized. So it's on us as the faculty to make sure that we critically assess what that Safe Assign report means. For a while, several of us have been trying to get Turnitin. I think it's a little more robust, but it's also a little more expensive. So I'm going to continue to beat the drum that I prefer that tool. Maybe that's a personal thing. But often we can really see differences in the style of writing, and we need to be aware of this. If you ever suspect that you've got a student who has recycled a paper, in other words, it sort of meets the requirements of your assignment, but it just feels like it was probably something they wrote for something else, then I would reach out to Joyce, because she's got access to all their previous classes, right? So if she can see that this is sort of about ethics, but it's really about marketing, she can look into their previous marketing class and see what they wrote about in that class. So occasionally that happens. Let's see. I love the comments. It's funny when they plagiarize a paper about ethics. It's also tragic. Yeah. And great comments. We could all collectively write a book, right? Don't you think? So again, proactively communicating, here's what I expect. I'm currently teaching a capstone class, and I've had several students that recycled their papers from earlier classes, though I was very clear, this is all new learning. If you wrote something about global warming in the past and this is still something you're very much interested in, great, but it needs to be a new paper. It needs to be new learning. It can't be a recycled paper. I even said, I've got access to your old paper, so don't do it, and they still did it, those jokers. All right, just a couple more thoughts. Let's talk a little bit about grievances. So in the adult handbook, again, starting on page 34, there's a description of the informal and formal process. And I just wanted to communicate and review that for you. The informal process typically occurs when a student complains that, you know, you've graded them too harshly, and they've called their academic counselor, they've called somebody at the campus, and they've said, man, Derek Day is just the meanest grader I've ever had, and it's not fair, and I've got the first B of my entire life, and I am upset. And what that academic advisor is going to say is, you need to reach out to your faculty member, and you need to discuss their feedback and make sure you understand the feedback. And that's the informal step. They point the students back to you. And I think culturally at OU, we do a really good job of that. And our assumption is you're handling things right. So don't feel like if there's a complaint, don't let that immediately give you a stomach ache, because it's going to happen from time to time. The formal process occurs when a student has called you and they are not satisfied with the outcome, and they may choose to submit a written complaint that goes directly to the Dean of Instruction, who is Dr. Joyce Caldwell. And when that is received, the formal process begins. So within 10 days, she needs to assign a committee to look into your Blackboard shell, look at the student's work, read the student's complaint, call you and get your assessment of the situation, and then make a recommendation. And that's another reason that many of you do an outstanding job with your announcements and your feedback. Make sure, friends, that there's enough evidence that that committee can see exactly what you did. And just know that it could be assessed and critiqued in the future. So make sure you're doing an excellent job with your feedback, your announcements, give students a heads up, you're in compliance with the late policy and other policies. So that's kind of a level one of the formal process. If the student is still not happy with what that first committee has stated is the case, then it will take another step up to the Dean of Instruction, Joyce herself, reviewing everything and making a ruling, and that's where the buck stops. Occasionally students, do other silly things and write additional letters, and they're certainly welcome to do that. But take time to review the policy on page 34 of the adult handbook. Let's see. One student told the advisor that you needed to change the grade. Is that right? Yeah, that happens sometimes. I think that's a misunderstanding of who's in charge of the class. It's not the student. And I think most of our advisors are sophisticated enough that they know they've heard half the story when a student calls, sharing how horribly unfair we may be as faculty. So just keep communicating. Don't let that trouble you. Now, if you have an advisor call you and say, you need to do this, then that's probably some professional feedback that the advisor would benefit from. So, again, I know Joyce well. I really trust Joyce will handle things fairly. She is not a fly off the handle person. So if you're experiencing something, I would encourage you to share it, because she is not somebody who's going to go give a student or an advisor the what for. She's somebody who listens well and wants to understand everybody's perspective. And then diplomatically, with civility, we'll give some feedback and thoughts. So that is the informal and formal process. So let's talk a little bit about questions and just discussion. What else could we share a little more about that would be helpful to all of you? And it's about 10 till noon. So if anybody needs to go, I understand it's a busy Saturday, but I'm here to visit for a little bit if you would like. And I will send out the PowerPoint that we've just discussed. This is really just a review and an introduction. But just a summary statement, please know we want to help you be successful as part-time instructors. We so value what you do for students at Ottawa University. And we want your students to be successful. We also want you to be successful. So keep communicating with us. And by the way, other training things or discussions you want to be having that we can facilitate to help you be more successful, please keep us informed on that. We want to know that. So what would you all like to discuss related to this topic? What are you experiencing or struggling with?
Kristen, it's Pete Reiniger. In the last year, I've taught 3 classes of international students of around 20 to 25 students per class. Most of them were from India. Most of them were not Christian. It has nothing to do with anything other than the fact that I caught many of them cheating, copying from each other, in addition to that, they gave excuses like, well, we coordinated on Skype. Well, you can't take a whole paragraph and make it word for word by discussing something on Skype. I can caution anybody that gets to teach these people that they're fine people in class. They're very polite. They're very respectful, but their opinion toward plagiarism and cheating from each other is quite different from ours. And evidently, these 3 classes, we didn't give them enough up front to tell them how serious it was if they got caught cheating. And it wasn't difficult to catch them. And I've had probably over 5 years teaching online, I've caught maybe 10 others from Ottawa students from the United States also. Anyway, that's my experience. If people have these international students, they should be aware that they still haven't caught on to our ethics.
Yeah, that's a good comment, Pete. I had the pleasure of teaching a face-to-face group of students from India as well. Extremely bright, and really enjoyed the interaction in class. But I noticed that there was more of a collaborative approach among them compared to what we would suggest is appropriate in the classroom. I also noticed that they really struggled with the idea of sourcing in-text citations, giving credit where credit is due from an academic perspective. And I guess I would say a couple of things about that. The first is that for the cohort groups, we have some face-to-face executive MBA students in Arizona, about 150 of them from all over the world. In Kansas City, we have had a few cohorts made up entirely of students from other nations. And even this weekend, we've got a group of 17 face-to-face doing an accelerated EMBA program. One of the things they do as part of the orientation for these students is working very hard at clarifying expectations of individual work. What does academic writing look like? And so I think we have to, in most cases, handle that on a case-by-case basis. I see some comments that we really want to start with a positive assumption. I think that's certainly true. But when it's been confronted and discussed and you feel that you've been clear in your correction of what is expected compared to what has been produced in the class, and please chime in, everybody else, what I've done is I assign a 0 and say, we need to talk about this. And that typically is very motivating to all students to all of a sudden have a 0 that brings their average down, and they're quick to get on the phone, and then we can discuss it. And if you found, Pete or others, that you had to have that type of discussion, I would encourage you to reach out to Joyce and say, I need Dr. Mary Lou DeWald from the international program on this call, and I need to understand contextually what we've done so far to educate students about what we expect and what's appropriate academic behavior in this setting.
I did all that. I did all that. Yes. Okay.
So how did that end up going, Pete? Did you give them 0s, or what'd you do? Oh, I think you froze. When you unfreeze, come join us again. Is it Pete frozen, or am I frozen? I don't think I'm frozen. I can see all of you moving. Okay.
For the work. Anyway, I gave them a 0 for the assignment. Some of them were able to.
Hey, Pete, we're having a hard time hearing you. I think you've got some disruption.
For the course, all of them. actually very good students. 2 or 3 of the.
Okay. All right. Pete, we got about half of what you said there, sir. So if you could email or in the chat box, give us that summary. I think your bandwidth was fluctuating there for a little bit. Let's see. Somebody has a question about... so Mary, you're talking about students that just keep reaching out and want you to extend the hours you're available. Tell us a little bit about that. Oh, I see you unmuted, but I still can't hear you. I'm sorry. Can't hear you. Nope, I see you're unmuted. So you just had students. Annie, thanks for coming. I see your chat message. Thank you so much. So Mary, you said I'm available between this time, and they kept communicating outside of those hours. Is that correct? Okay, okay. So I just don't respond. I don't respond until the next morning. I sometimes get text messages late at night. And of course, you know, we can all set our little phones and devices to night mode, and unless you're on the super duper important list, your text message doesn't ding and wake me up at 2 in the morning. I just wait until it is, it's in my window of response time, and then I respond. So I may see it at 11 o'clock, but I am most certainly not going to respond at 11 o'clock, because then they start expecting me to respond at 11 o'clock at night, and I'm not going to do it. So I think in that case, I would probably just communicate and say, you know, these are my hours. If you want to send an email, you'll hear back from me the next day. And thank you so much.
May I say something?
With students across the entire nation and some military students who may be in the opposite, you know, hemisphere and things, clarifying those boundaries is a really good idea. Billy, you had a comment, please.
Yes, sometimes when we're close to the end of the term, or there's an assignment that's due and it can't be postponed like a discussion forum, then I do make the exception and I will answer at a late time, because frankly, you know, I stay up late. So I figure if I'm up at 11 and the student, you know, has a deadline, which is in an hour, and I can give them a quick answer, then I just do that.
That's very nice. That's great. And certainly the sense of urgency goes way up near the end of the term. One of the things that I've done is have virtual office hours right before key assignments are due. If they've got last minute emergency questions, I can kind of capture all those folks and talk to them together. But, you know, there are usually just a few of them that are really focused on that perfect or excellent score. Good.
This is Lisa. Living in Hawaii is beautiful, obviously, but I'm 5 hours behind Central Time. So what happened to me was I started getting text messages at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 o'clock in the morning, because my Eastern students didn't realize that even though it was 12 o'clock in the afternoon, that I'm still sleeping. So what I did was I went ahead and took the entire United States and broke it down in my contact office hours, you know, office hours and contact information, and let them know 10 a.m. in Eastern time zone is 4 a.m. in Hawaii. You know, 10 a.m. in Central time zone is 5 a.m. in Hawaii. And I literally just went through and explained exactly what that time frame difference was. And my text no longer started blowing up in the middle of the night, because they started understanding that my office hours are actually like 3 to 10 or 11 o'clock at night for them, because of the fact that I'm not, you know, when I wake up at 8 o'clock in the morning, they're getting off work. So once they started understanding that, that's what really helped. And so I don't know if that would help, Mary, with you, of just, you know, like specifically, you know, breaking down the different time zones. And, you know, it just made a huge difference for me. Once I put out that, those phone calls and those text messages just stopped. And You know, I still have one or two students that'll forget, but I don't respond to them until I wake up, you know, or until it's my office hour time, because I'm readily available to them from 3 o'clock in the afternoon until 11 o'clock at night, Central Time Zone. I think that's plenty of time for them to contact me, and a huge amount of office hours. So it just made a huge difference. So just a thought or an idea to help them understand the differences in time zones, because we really do online have people all over the place, including Hawaii. And so I have a student right now in Oahu. So it really helps them understand, you know, where we are, what our office hours are, when we're available, and that's when those texts start stopping. But as Billy was saying, it's usually at the end of the term when we start getting these panic texts of, you know, can I get an extension kind of thing, and if I don't email right away, then all of a sudden the phone blows up. So I understand that as well, but I still stick with my office hours. I still wait until I wake up in the morning. Oftentimes I'll even start putting my phone on Do Not Disturb, because it really got insane for me that the phone just kept blowing up about students wanting extensions. It's like, no. So just a thought. I just wanted to share that.
Those are great observations. Yeah. I appreciate you making the effort to, you know, I think some of our students who have not traveled as much and they've lived where they've lived their entire lives don't really have a good handle on the whole time zone, time change concept to begin with. So Mary, it's interesting that you noted that it's the international students. I think many international students keep fairly late hours. And so that may be part of it as well. What else are y'all facing out there?
Kristen, this is Jerry.
Hi.
Hi. One of the frustrating things for me is that I spend a lot of time grading the assignments, particularly the spelling, grammar, and APA part.
Yes.
And I noticed that for the most part, I make the same corrections, and I go through, I line out the wrong thing, type in the correct thing, I make comments, I make notes on the paper, I do it on the side in terms of the written feedback, and I noticed that most of the students, I make the same comments, the same spelling, grammar, and it's like I could probably just set up something, copy and paste it into the assignment feedback. And I think I probably deduct more points from students, not because of content, but because of spelling, grammar, APA. And I'm not even sure if they're looking at the rubrics. I use the rubric, and I tell them I use the rubric, and I tell them, make sure you review the rubric so you know what's required, because that's how I'm prepared. I don't know if they actually go with the rubric or not, but I do find myself saying the same things every week to most of the students.
Well, the first thing I would say, Jerry, is thank you for providing all that wonderful feedback to your students. That's what we want from you as an instructor at Ottawa University. So first of all, thank you for grading with integrity and with the desire to help those students improve their skills substantially. I just saw lots of nodding heads when you said, sometimes I feel like they don't even read what I say. And I say that to my husband every term. Why am I working so hard to provide this feedback? They don't apply. And there will always be some students who do not apply the feedback we provide. And I've got a thought I'm going to share in a second, but the rest of you, what have you done to help encourage, cajole, beg your students to apply the feedback you provide? What have you done that has worked for you?
This is Bob. One of the things I do is, like Jerry said, I will make the corrections. For example, in APA, I'm seeing, and I'd like to hear from others, but in APA, as far as formatting references, and I'm not trying to declare that in the form of, you know, a doctoral student, but I mean basic formatting. I will maybe write a correct reference format, but I see a lot of just people or students will just put a link and nothing else. In references, for example. So I will write what a correct reference looks like. Or in the case of third person, they'll start their paper with I, and I did this, and I did. So I will correct that to like the author would, you know, the author commented on something and write in the third person. So I make those corrections, but to Jerry's points, I have some students that do change in you know, and do it correctly, which makes you feel good because you feel like, well, they actually read this. But I do have a few that I see that I'm doing repeated comments throughout the course.
As Mary and Lisa mentioned, emailing is a good strategy that I've found. If I notice a pattern of them not applying my feedback, I will email them individually and say, I noticed that I've been providing feedback and applied my feedback to your assignments. You know, is there something that we can do to make sure that you're reading my feedback and making use of it? And that usually will help to at least have them look at it. Or they might say, I didn't even know there was feedback. That's happened before. I'm not sure how they could have gotten through. You know, a lot of times I teach the last class and how they could have gone through all their classes and not realize there was feedback, which is another issue, but I think that helps. Emailing helps.
Any other thoughts from you all that have helped you? Announcements on finding your feedback for their grades. Yes, feedback's out there. Please read and apply this feedback on your next assignment. Mary also mentioned in the chat escalating the points deducted. I think that's a very good strategy. The first time you make this violation, it's going to be 3 points off. But if you don't apply and continue to grow, it's gonna continue to mount and be more impactful to your grade. Because my expectation is you're going to be growing. I want to provide you with the opportunity to grow. And that's one of the ways I do that. Great suggestions. So I've mentioned earlier, I've gotten meaner as time has gone on. When I'm teaching a class and they've got a big signature assignment, especially in the capstone in week 7, Monday morning after they post all their work on Sunday night, I scan through. And if they have not correctly formatted their references, for example, and they don't even have a cover page, and I've told them how to fix their running head 10 times, I'll put a 0, and I'll say something like, this is a temporary grade. I look forward to reviewing your work as soon as you apply the basics that I have provided to you for the last 7 weeks. Please feel very welcome to call me if you would like to discuss this further. And I give them my number. And that gets their attention. And I don't do it in a mean way, but by golly, you're not getting out of my capstone class if you can't format a reference page. And that's all there is to it. And they can throw a fit and they can, you know, it's fine. It's all fine.
In that class, because we give them an opportunity to do the references in week 5 or week 4, I forget now, but
that's right.
We're giving them feedback on the references earlier in the term. And if they don't apply that feedback then in the final paper, I do the same thing. I give them a 0 and welcome them to resubmit.
Yes, and I typically give them a deadline. And if you do this by Tuesday at midnight, there won't be a late penalty. If I'm in a good mood. But they've had ample opportunity. And that maybe comes back to the point that came up earlier. It is not their first exposure to APA. So if you go the route of placing an announcement that says, here's what I expect with APA, I think you could even in your verbiage infer that you know this is not the first time that they've had to work in APA, and I trust you've mastered this, and I've heard you're just an excellent class, and I look forward to your well-written work. Yeah.
That's great. Great feedback. Reading. Thanks, Kristen, for that. Also, the chats. I got some good ideas.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm loving all the chat sharing. Thank you all for engaging in that way. What other items should we discuss today, friends? Anything else related to challenges with students?
I would love to talk about the amount of time for feedback. I know that we all have 7 days to provide feedback. For the discussions, I get my feedback done before Wednesdays because I know that my students are starting on their discussion assignments already. Personally, I think having until Sunday, it's great for us as instructors to be able to manage our time, but they're already submitting the next written assignment. So one of the things that I would like to see is to have stricter guidelines for all of us to be able to get that feedback back to the students, even though they may or may not be reading it. I just think that it's beneficial for them to be able to make that growth and make that achievement. I rarely see, I also work as a mentor, I rarely see a mentor wait that long. But in the online standards for instruction, it literally says that we have 7 days for all the assignments. So any thoughts on that from anybody else?
Well, I'll speak up. Lisa, I agree with your assessment. The sooner we can get feedback to students, the more it benefits them for those who do engage and use and apply it. I know enough people on the phone here to know we all have really busy lives. And so I think it's good to have an ideal that says you get all of your feedback to your students within 3 to 5 days. I know some folks on the phone work in various capacities in other institutions, and some places require 3 to 5 days. And if I were all powerful, that would be our policy as well. I want to be realistic about our schedules, but students need our feedback to learn and grow. So if we don't provide that feedback in a timely fashion, they can't benefit, and then there's a big delay, a 1 week delay. So, I think an ideal of Wednesday or Thursday is a wise strategy, knowing that we have things, life happens to us as well, and we shouldn't be procrastinating until the weekend, every weekend. And I would post an announcement. Week 1, especially in classes that students take early in the program, that announcement is called, "When can I expect my feedback?" And I just tell them the policy that my max is 7 days. My goal is 3 to 5.
And I do the same thing. I let them know, in my first week, you should be able to see my discussion assignments before Wednesday, and my written, any written assignment feedback by Thursday. Mm-hmm. Give or take a couple of days, depending on, what I've got going on, especially if I have a crisis, a suicidal student or not student, but client. But I think it really helps because some of our students actually do love our feedback, and they're just constantly logging in to see what they did, how well they did on their grade. They're,
right. Well, and I know about you, Lisa, that you post an announcement every week. Your week 2 feedback, it has been posted.
Yeah.
Let me know if you have questions. So that's
exactly.
a nice way to just inform everybody at once. It's out there. But you should know that in Blackboard, when you post a grade, they receive an automatic notification that says it's been graded and feedback has been posted. So I know when I'm a student, I love that email. Ooh, what did I get? And I'm right out there. So good.
No, I used to be the same student logging in all the time. How'd I do? How'd I do?
Refresh. Yeah. Yeah. We all have our neurosis.
Yes. But that's also why I let them know, in general, you should expect your discussion assignment feedback by Tuesday nights. And in general, I try to get my my written assignments back to you by Thursday, you know, give or take a few days. You know, that's my goal. And then if I get off my goal, I actually email and send an announcement, or do the announcement / email all at the same time, just to let them know that I'm off my schedule.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I think,
that's great.
I think that it demonstrates to them what we want if
Mhm.
they're running behind.
Exactly.
You know, just a quick email, hey, you know, had some crazy stuff come up this week. I don't need 4 million pages of an email, but just something to let me know. And so I like, you know, using our opportunity to be a role model to them on what to do when things come up in our lives. Because
Yeah.
not only do they have busy lives, but all of us have very busy lives as well.
That's right.
So I just love to do that role modeling, and also just let them know the expectation. Otherwise, I get bombarded with emails and texts on, you know, when am I going to get my feedback, because they start panicking that I didn't receive it. That's when you start seeing the 1 out of 5 submissions, you know. It's like,
that's right. That's right. There must be something wrong. Exactly right.
Right?
Exactly right.
And I'm like, okay, that's a little too much, and I need grading. Thank you. You know, I did get it.
Well, and those students are conscientious. This matters to them. I love that about our adult students. So proactively managing with communication is a great strategy. All right, friends. Well, is there anything else to visit about today? I sure appreciate you making time on a Saturday to join us. Thank you so much. Hope you all have a great weekend. The Fall 1 term starts Monday. So for those teaching in Fall 1, I hope you've gotten all of your preparation done. Students are already in those shells, and fall's a big time. It's a busy time, and it's great. So thank you all very much, and hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks,
for
Kristen.
now.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Kristen, bye.
Bye-bye.